The Cleveland Browns may have just revealed the biggest shift in their franchise, and it didn't happen during a game, a press conference, or even a headline-making trade. It happened quietly, almost unnoticed at first, on a routine practice field. No roaring crowd, no primetime spotlight, just a voluntary workout and one very expensive absence that said more than any speech ever could. Because when a team that has invested everything into a single quarterback suddenly shows signs of moving on without him, you're not looking at a small issue, you're looking at the beginning of something much bigger. How do you lose control of a locker room without throwing a single interception? How does a franchise begin to shift away from its centerpiece without making an official announcement? That's the situation unfolding in Cleveland right now. This is a team that has spent years trying to rebuild its identity, pouring money, trust, and expectations into one face of the franchise. But in a league where leadership is measured in presence, not contracts, something feels like it's slipping. And the most unsettling part, it's happening in plain sight, with no one stepping in to stop it. Because when the cameras turned on for the Browns' first look at the 2026 season, the story wasn't who was there, it was who wasn't. The energy felt different, the leadership felt missing. Fans expected to see the man who carries the weight of the franchise leading the charge, setting the tone, reminding everyone why the team believed in him in the first place. Instead, there was a void. And in the NFL, a void at quarterback doesn't stay empty for long. But here's where things take a turn. This wasn't just about one absence, one skipped workout, or even one questionable decision. Because while one figure faded into the background, another presence began to rise, and not quietly, not cautiously, but with the kind of confidence that forces everyone around him to take notice. No announcement, no official promotion, just a shift you could feel the moment he stepped onto the field. And if that moment means what it looks like it means, then this isn't just a story about a missing quarterback. This is the beginning of a power change, one that could redefine the Browns' future faster than anyone expected. The first real sign that something was off didn't come from a headline, it came from a simple piece of footage released by the team, a routine look at a voluntary workout, the kind fans usually scroll past without thinking twice. But this time, something felt different, almost immediately. The field was active, players were moving, coaches were engaged, yet the one presence that should have defined the entire scene was nowhere to be found. Deshaun Watson, the face of the franchise, the quarterback tied to one of the biggest contracts in league history, was missing, and not in a vague, maybe he'll show up later kind of way. He simply wasn't there. Now, technically, nothing about this is wrong. These are voluntary workouts. Players aren't required to attend. Veterans skip them all the time. But context is everything. This isn't just any veteran. This is the player the Browns built their entire future around. The same player who has spent the past year assuring everyone he's back, healthy, and ready to reclaim his place after a brutal Achilles setback. And yet, when the first real opportunity came to show leadership, to stand in front of teammates, to set the tone, to remind everyone why the team believed in him in the first place, instead, there was a void. And in the NFL, a void at quarterback doesn't stay empty for long. If Deshaun Watson's absence raised eyebrows, what's happening with Dillon Gabriel has people inside and outside the building asking even bigger questions. Because unlike Deshaun's, whose situation at least comes with a public narrative about recovery and preparation, Gabriel's disappearance feels quieter, less explained, and in some ways more calculated. Reports and whispers around the team suggest he hasn't been around the facility in weeks, with some even claiming he's back in Hawaii, completely removed from what's shaping up to be one of the most important quarterback battles in the league. Now, none of that has been officially confirmed, but the silence surrounding him is starting to speak volumes.
And that's where the speculation begins to build. Because this isn't just any backup quarterback sitting out. Gabriel came into this situation as a potential safety net, the steady option who could step in if things went sideways. But instead of leaning into that opportunity, it's been said that he might be doing the exact opposite, pulling away at a time when the team is evaluating everything. Some believe this could be a strategic move. Think about it. If he shows up and competes, he risks getting buried in a three-way battle. But if he stays distant, avoids the chaos, and lets the situation play out, he could position himself as a clean, tradable asset for another team looking for stability under center. It's a risky approach, but not an unheard-of one. Around the league, players have quietly used absence as leverage before, and if that's what's happening here, it would explain the timing. The Browns are entering a critical phase, evaluating their options, trying to figure out who truly belongs in that quarterback room. By not being present, Gabriel removes himself from the immediate pressure, but in doing so, he also creates uncertainty, and uncertainty, especially at the quarterback position, can shift an entire organization's direction overnight. But there's another side to this, because while this strategy might make sense from a business standpoint, it comes at a cost. Football locker rooms aren't built on contracts or long-term plans. They're built on trust and presence. And when teammates look around during key moments and notice who isn't there, it changes how they see you. Fair or not, perception becomes reality. And right now, the perception forming around Gabriel is that he's choosing distance over competition. And that decision, whether intentional or not, has opened the door wider than anyone expected. Because with one quarterback absent and another possibly stepping away from the fight, the path isn't just clearing, it's practically being handed to someone else. And into that growing void stepped Shedeur Sanders, not with an announcement, not with a headline, but with something far more powerful: presence. While the established names were either absent or surrounded by questions, Shedeur showed up and immediately changed the energy in the building. This wasn't the typical rookie experience, where a young quarterback quietly observes, tries not to make mistakes, and slowly earns his place. From the moment he walked onto that field, it felt different. The tempo picked up, the focus sharpened, and without saying a word, he started positioning himself as someone far more important than just another name on the depth chart. What stood out wasn't just his performance, it was how everyone else responded to him. Teammates weren't treating him like a newcomer trying to find his footing. They were engaging with him, listening to him, moving with him. Players like Jerry Jeudy and Zion Johnson weren't looking around for direction. They were naturally gravitating towards Shedeur. That kind of reaction doesn't come from hype or reputation alone. It comes from something players recognize instantly: confidence backed by action. In a setting where nobody is required to be there, the one who steps up and takes control stands out even more. And that's exactly what makes this moment so significant. Shedeur didn't need a speech, a title, or a coach's endorsement. He simply acted like the leader, and in doing so, he forced everyone else to adjust. Every rep, every drill, every interaction became part of a larger statement. He wasn't there to compete quietly. He was there to take something. In a league where opportunities are usually earned slowly over time, he's accelerating the entire process just by showing up and owning the moment. And there's also a deeper layer to this. Leadership in the NFL isn't handed out based on contracts or draft position. It's felt in real time. It's built in those small, almost invisible moments when players decide who they trust, who they follow, and who they believe in when things get tough. And right now, in the absence of the expected leaders, Shedeur is becoming that figure by default, but also by design. Because this doesn't look accidental, it looks intentional. And the most dangerous part, he's doing it without resistance. No public pushback, no visible competition, just a quiet, steady takeover happening right in front of everyone. And by the time the rest of the league fully recognizes it, the job might not even be up for debate anymore. And just when you thought this was all happening quietly behind closed doors, the Browns themselves may have sent the loudest signal of all, without saying so much as a word. Because in today's NFL, teams communicate not just through press conferences, they communicate through what they choose to show and what they choose to leave out. When the Browns media team released their first wave of photos and clips from the workout, fans weren't just watching for highlights, they were reading between the lines. and what they saw was impossible to ignore. And here's the real problem. Perception in the NFL can become reality faster than almost anything else. When a quarterback starts being viewed as distant, whether that's fair or not, it changes how everything he does is interpreted. A missed session becomes a statement, a quiet week becomes a concern. And in Watson's case, where patience from the fan base has already been tested, there's very little margin left for doubt. Every decision now carries weight, and every absence feels amplified. Inside the locker room, this creates an even more delicate situation, because players don't just evaluate talent, they evaluate presence, consistency, and accountability. And when those elements start to feel inconsistent, it opens the door for someone else to step in and redefine what leadership looks like. That doesn't mean Watson has lost his role completely, but it does mean he's no longer untouchable. The idea of him being the unquestioned centerpiece of the franchise is starting to crack, not because of one moment, but because of a pattern that's becoming harder to ignore. And that's what makes this so critical. This isn't just about whether Watson can perform when the season starts. It's about whether he can rebuild belief inside the building, not just outside of it. Because once a locker room begins to shift its trust elsewhere, getting it back isn't just difficult, it might already be too late. And this is exactly where the conversation shifts from uncertainty to something much more calculated. Because what we're seeing with Shedeur Sanders doesn't feel accidental anymore. It feels learned. It feels intentional. And if you look at where he comes from, that starts to make a lot more sense. Growing up under the influence of Deion Sanders, one of the most strategic minds the game has ever seen, Shedeur hasn't just been taught how to play quarterback, he's been taught how to control situations. This is what some people are starting to call the prime effect. It's not just about talent, it's about understanding timing, presence, and perception better than anyone else in the room. While other players rely purely on performance, Shedeur is operating on a different level, one where every move sends a message, showing up when others don't, leading when nobody asked him to, building chemistry in moments that don't make headlines. These aren't random actions, they're part of a bigger picture, one where he's not waiting for permission to lead, he's making it impossible for the team to ignore him. And that's where the power shift becomes real. Because in most quarterback battles, the conversation revolves around stats, arm strength, and system fit, but this situation is evolving into something else entirely. It's becoming about identity, about who represents the future of the franchise, not just on the field, but in the locker room, in the media, and in the minds of the players. And right now, Shedeur is checking boxes that go far beyond the playbook. He's becoming the kind of presence that organizations don't just want, they build around. What makes this even more dangerous for the current hierarchy is how subtle it's been. There's been no confrontation, no public challenge, no moment where he openly tries to take the spotlight. Instead, he's letting the situation unfold naturally while positioning himself right at the center of it. And in doing so, he's turning what should have been a competition into something that feels a lot closer to a takeover. Because once a player starts combining performance, presence, and perception like this, the shift becomes hard to stop. Coaches notice it, teammates feel it, the organization begins to lean into it. And before long, the question isn't who's competing for the job, it's when did the job stop being a competition? And if this continues on its current path, then what's happening in Cleveland isn't just a temporary storyline, it's the early stages of a complete transformation, one driven not by announcements or contracts, but by a quarterback who understands exactly how to take control without ever needing to ask for it. So where does all of this actually lead? Because at some point, the speculation, the body language, and the subtle signals all collide with reality. And for the Cleveland Browns, that moment is coming fast. Over the next few weeks, decisions won't just be discussed behind closed doors. They'll start showing up in moves, depth charts, and roster changes that make the direction of this team impossible to ignore. The biggest domino right now surrounds Dillon Gabriel. There's already growing buzz that a potential move could be on the horizon, with reports suggesting teams around the league are quietly monitoring his situation.
If that turns into a trade, it won't just be a roster adjustment, it'll be a signal, a clear indication that the Browns are ready to simplify the quarterback room, and in doing so, clear the runway for something new. Of course, nothing is confirmed yet, and these are just rumors circulating around the league, but in situations like this, where absence and uncertainty overlap, those rumors tend to gain traction quickly.
Then there's the bigger, more complicated question. What happens with Deshaun Watson? His contract alone makes any immediate dramatic move unlikely, but contracts don't control locker rooms. Performance and presence do. And if the internal belief continues to shift away from him, the Browns may find themselves in a position where they have to rethink not just who starts, but how they define leadership at the most important position on the field. That doesn't mean Watson is out of the picture entirely, but it does mean the margin for error is shrinking fast. Every rep he misses, every moment he's not part of the process, adds pressure to a situation that's already fragile. Meanwhile, Shedeur Sanders continues to gain ground without needing any official confirmation, and that's what makes this so unique. Usually, a young quarterback has to wait for an opportunity, an injury, a bad stretch of games, something that forces the team's hand. But here, the opportunity is forming organically. It's being built through presence, through trust, through the quiet support of teammates who are already starting to see him as more than just a prospect. And if that momentum continues, the Browns may not have to make a difficult decision at all. The answer could become obvious on its own. What the organization is signaling, whether intentionally or not, is becoming clearer by the day. The past, no matter how expensive or heavily invested in, is no longer guaranteed protection. And the future isn't something they're waiting for, it's something that might already be standing in front of them. That kind of shift doesn't just affect one season, it changes the trajectory of the entire franchise. And that's why the next phase is so critical, because once moves start happening, once a trade is made, once reps are redistributed, once roles begin to solidify, there's no going back to uncertainty. The Browns are approaching a point where they won't just be hinting at a new direction, they'll be committing to it. And when you step back and look at everything that's unfolded, the picture becomes impossible to ignore. This wasn't just about a missed workout or a few absent names on a practice field. It was a moment that revealed where this team is really heading. Because while Deshaun Watson carries the contract and Dillon Gabriel carries the experience, neither of them carried the moment when it mattered most. And in the NFL, moments like that have a way of redefining everything. At the same time, Shedeur Sanders didn't just participate in that moment, he owned it. Not with words, not with headlines, but with presence and energy and the kind of leadership that players recognize instantly. And that's what makes this shift feel different. It's not being forced by coaches or dictated by management. It's happening naturally, inside the locker room, where trust is built and decisions are quietly made long before they're announced to the public. Because the truth is, you can't lead a team from a highlight clip or a training video. You can't build trust from a distance. Leadership in this league is earned in the dirt, in the heat, in those voluntary moments where nobody has to be there, but the ones who show up stand out the most. And right now, the Browns are seeing that difference play out in real time. One era, built on expectations and investment, is starting to fade, and another, built on presence and belief, is beginning to take its place. This doesn't mean the story is finished, far from it. There are still decisions to be made, roles to be defined, and a full season ahead that will ultimately determine how this all plays out. But something has already changed, and it's something you can't easily reverse. The dynamic inside this team is shifting, and once that kind of shift takes hold, it tends to move forward, not backward. So, the real question now isn't who the Browns plan to build around, it's who they're already starting to believe in. Because if what we've seen so far is any indication, this isn't just the beginning of a quarterback battle, it's the beginning of a new era in Cleveland. And whether the rest of the league is ready or not, that era might already be here. There was no Deshaun Watson, no Dillon Gabriel, not even a glimpse, not even a background appearance that could suggest they were around. Instead, the spotlight was almost entirely centered on Shedeur Sanders, frame after frame, Clip after clip, it was him leading drills, him interacting with teammates, him at the center of the action. And in a league where every piece of content is carefully curated, that kind of focus isn't random, it's intentional. Think about how calculated these releases are. Teams understand that fans dissect everything. Every angle, every caption, every second of footage becomes part of a larger narrative. So when the organization chooses to highlight one quarterback while completely excluding the others, it sends a message, even if they never say it out loud. It tells the locker room who's being leaned on. It tells the fans who to start paying attention to. And maybe most importantly, it tells the players themselves where things might be heading. This is where perception starts to become reality, because even if no official decision has been made, the image being projected is already shaping opinions. Players notice it, agents notice it, the entire league notices it. And once that narrative takes hold, it becomes incredibly difficult to reverse. Suddenly, it's not just about who performs better, it's about who already looks like the leader. And that's what makes this moment so revealing. The Browns didn't need to announce a depth chart or declare a starter. They may have already hinted at it through something as simple as a social media post. Because in the modern NFL, the message isn't always spoken, it's shown. And right now, everything they're showing points in one direction. What's happening on the field is only part of the story. The real shift, the one that can define an entire season, is happening inside the locker room, where nothing is announced but everything is felt. Because in the NFL, leadership isn't decided by contracts, headlines, or past achievements. It's decided in moments like these, when players look around during the grind and quietly ask themselves one question: who's really here with us? And right now, the answer to that question is starting to change. Think about the guys on the other side of the ball. Players like Quincy Williams and Mason Graham aren't concerned with social media narratives or long-term contracts. They're putting in the work, sweating through reps, preparing for a season that demands everything from them physically and mentally. And when they glance toward the quarterback group, the position that's supposed to set the tone, they don't just see talent, they see behavior. They see who's present, who's engaged, and who's missing when it matters. That's where the psychology begins to shift, because when two expected leaders are absent, whether for different reasons or not, it creates a subtle but powerful disconnect. It plants a seed of doubt, not necessarily about ability, but about commitment. And in a sport where trust is everything, even a small crack can spread quickly. Players don't need speeches to figure this out. They feel it through repetition, through shared effort, through who's standing next to them when nobody is forcing them to be there. Meanwhile, Shedeur Sanders is building something in real time, not through promises, but through consistency. Every rep he takes, every interaction he has, every moment he chooses to show up adds another layer to how his teammates see him. And that perception is powerful, because once a locker room starts to believe in someone, it becomes less about who should be the leader and more about who already is. And this is where things get difficult to reverse. You can fix mechanics, you can adjust game plans, but rebuilding trust inside a locker room, that's a much harder process, because once players start leaning toward one voice, one presence, one energy, it doesn't take long before that becomes the standard. And right now, without any official announcement, without any declared change, the Browns may already be experiencing that shift. And this is where the situation surrounding Deshaun Watson becomes far more complicated than just a missed workout, because this isn't happening in a vacuum. His time in Cleveland has already been weighed down with a constant cycle of setbacks, recovery timelines, and off-field headlines that never seem to fully disappear. None of that needs to be exaggerated. It's simply part of the reality that has followed him throughout his tenure with the Browns. So when moments like this happen, when he's not present during a key team activity, it doesn't get viewed as neutral. It gets added to an existing narrative that fans and teammates are already struggling to reconcile. Now, to be clear, there's no official statement saying this absence is about anything deeper, but that's exactly why the speculation is growing, because if he's truly as healthy as the reports and training clips suggest, then what's keeping him away from the field in a moment where leadership matters most?
That question doesn't come with an easy answer, and in the absence of clarity, people start filling in the gaps themselves. Some believe it's simply caution, protecting his body after a serious injury. Others suggest it could be something less physical and more personal, a mindset issue, or even a disconnect between him and the direction the team is heading. None of it is confirmed, but the conversation is happening, and it's getting louder.